The recording has been started. And if you see that it like falls over, could you?
Oh yeah.
Okay, it's in a very tenuous position right now.
I think I have it written down in my notes, so
Okay.
I will remember the password hopefully.
6318.
Yes, that's
Cool.
what I have in my notes.
Let me know whenever your body is ready for the code.
Oh, we're doing speech draw?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Wait, hold on, I'm not ready.
No problem.
Okay, I'm good.
Capital M, capital G, 9, lowercase x, capital Y, lowercase d.
I was so happy I would be able to use my email again, just after Grapevine blocking me out of Yahoo.
Is that not working?
Holden uses Yahoo? I didn't know that. No, I feel like such a geriatric because I feel like I'm like one of the last like 3 people on earth that use Yahoo, but like all the Gmail accounts with my name in them are taken because I have like the most generic like white guy name anyone like ever born has. So I just use Yahoo instead because no one bothers with it.
Are any of you guys feeling weirdly cold in here?
It's been cold in like every room.
It's very
been a
cold.
problem
Every
all
room
day.
It's been really
I can
cold.
tell Rodrigo again, but
It's fine.
I think
It's
his
fine.
answer's
I-
gonna be we tried.
Yeah.
I think
We
it's
tried
just
earlier.
started to get better. Like the main conference room is a lot better now.
That's
so
true,
I think,
yeah,
I think maybe the
Yeah.
heat will like radiate out from there.
No, because like I was cold and then I like came in here and or I wasn't cold and then I was in there and now I'm cold again. It's really sad.
Yeah. The last debate I judged, one of the kids like brought their like comforter from their hotel room to the round and just like wore it the whole time. And honestly, if I were like at this hotel, I'd do the same thing.
Luckily we had a blanket in the car that I could just steal. He's so
Okay, I'm good.
Is everybody ready?
State-based housing is built on a history of harassment of black women. State-based guaranteed housing will come with standard result which allow for surveillance of the black community in Order 17. Well, for modern women's action, state surveillance on the lives of poor women to find welfare as a waiver of privacy. Black women's departments be space for the state to remain a regulated, restricted food and material of others purchased along with employment. State surveillance is attempted to aid societies, which in itself is like specifically Black feminists coming together and creating like basically like I guess kind of support systems that not only allow for like pushing
What's a
against
house?
What's a house? A place that provides shelter.
How is a support system shelter?
Cool. So it's not necessarily just how the support system in itself provides shelter, but it's ways in which that the support system allows for the possibilities of accessing said shelter. For example, communities of care would advocate for grassroots movements such as Moms for
Okay,
Housing,
so-
which is squatting.
Sure, the advocating for grassroots movements is fine, but how do these grassroots movements guarantee like housing for people that do not have housing?
Yeah, so for example, Moms for Housing, which was a successful grassroots movement in single like Black mothers providing themselves with housing that might
How
not
do they
necessarily
provide themselves with housing?
Yeah, squatting.
What is squatting?
Squatting is just going into abandoned homes, making it your home.
Sure, I guess how does that guarantee things like proper sanitation if the act does not guarantee a legal
Cool.
right?
So for example, that's where like mutual aid societies come in, i.e. if I'm like squatting within an area and I'm like, yo, this house is like bad in this way, mutual aid societies can kind of come together and fix those like gaps and those problems.
Okay.
The also way in which it can provide, I guess, kind of like shelter in some ways is if we look at the evidence where it
Well,
talks about how
that's fine. Like that's fine. I have another question. What is black noise?
Yeah, so black noise is kind of the ways in which we like come together and kind of just like rebel and like use our voices and project, i.e. like the affirmative was an example of black noise, the way in which I got up and advocated for like Black feminists and the mutual aid societies was an example.
Sure.
of black
I guess
noise.
how does the like stop all criminalization of black bodies?
Cool. So we're not necessarily saying that like we stop all criminalization of black bodies. We're saying we specifically target the ways in which the housing crisis and the ways in which like words such as like vagrancy and the ways in which policy is specifically, I guess, kind of like bad towards black people within housing is the ways in which we're kind of like rejecting this.
Okay.
It's also like, for example, we combat things such as like one strike policy,
What's a
which
one
in
strike
itself, yeah. So one strike is like basically the like evictions caused by, I guess, kind of like usage of drugs. So it's not
Okay,
even that like you have to use drugs, but if you know anyone, if you like
Yeah,
hung
that's-
out with
that's
anyone,
fine.
if your kids
What does it mean to be a democratic
criminalized.
educator?
Huh?
What does it mean to be a democratic
So
educator?
it means to like structure yourselves like towards education in a way that is like
What is beneficial education and what is harmful education?
yeah, so like the ways in which we would say like harmful education can like formulate is like inherently oppressive or just generally
What
like,
is considered to be
violent forms.
oppressive?
So I think that I guess would kind of like I don't know how to like rephrase oppressive, but I can definitely speak more on like the violent ways in which education can kind of like
Okay, the order's gonna be to the case.
You said two.
Yeah, two. Sorry, the speech drop's getting me.
you're good.
Just gonna dry. Okay, it should be in there. Let me know if it's not.
Nope, I got it.
Okay, case will start with the roll of the ballot. Right, is everyone good?
It's downloading.
Oh, here.
Okay, fire.
Interpretation. Our interpretation of the affirmative must only garner offense of the affirmation of a legal right to housing. The United States means the federal government promoted day one. Server definition must be published in the U.S. Code federal must be read in the federal register to have legal effect without possible publishing. No penalties can be imposed. The term United States means the federal government not the petition brought codified by law. Noted in power held by the general public as a result of constitution, statute, regulation, judicial precedent, or any other type of law. Right to housing must be enshrined in law and enforceable. Anderson 12. Right to housing is enshrined in law legally enforceable through the courts and administration. Say housing and materials where people can live. Cambridge. Many buildings for people to live in violation. They only defend mutual aid, which is action topical standards. First is fairness. Radically and protections in the resolution. Let's not defend any methodology to tangentially relation to topic exploding limits which are used in aggregate of records research proven untenable by adversary and predictable elements. Procedural question compatibility is given makes no sense to competitive activity that requires effective, predictable, and fair negation, which is identifies the argument program, skewed burdens, and pedagogical engagement. Second is class making. Any grounds for debate pursues a way that the only common point of engagement which obviates career under research and incentivizes which shoot from autocracy by limiting any effective causal and passive negation distinguishes debate discussion by necessitating iterative testing and effective engagement but advances of constant refinement as students, revolutionary potential, learn topic education, students debating about the nitty-gritty political process, urban planning is goodness without not. With the youth participation in urban planning is limited to students sporadic engagement in the urban. While saving is beneficial for quality urban policy making by this without facilitating the engagement of youth people's with societal change, organizing community initiatives, significant output, catalyzing positive social economic change, ensure democratic equitable community down with the expertise, achievements, and political awareness, markers of experience of liberation, technical and American by local government results in national planning and being an all form create urban collaboration, but prioritize young people need to develop a road to our specialized needs to sustain active genuine youth participation in policy making, political education, by teaching how to build collaboration, how government funding, how policies are to reflect the needs in urban policy making, plug the hard at planning for is paradigm TV from housing is negative as a result of criminalization of black bodies over 2,000 cases about criminalization of homeless bodies and surveillance and next TV is from the right housing is a part of a broader revolutionary taxi law for housing connected abolition housing and broader demands which their afterwards the historical context of doing solvency holder law and two movements and a small budget calls into severe housing affordability present until 94 the fully evicted workers agree to open lenders the right of refusal in terms of being negotiated within the city with a clear show the resolution they're going to the movement except for beyond we're also going to keep this moving on we don't stop until everyone has because we want to show this is whether the law we want housing even right legislation continue to be policies designed to address this very often housing process today advancing more goals TV's terminal even through our models are mutually exclusive and any flux in substantive TV is often for us because it was our model allows for clear conversation form over content has to take it out because we don't show form to substantive burden of the applicant for competing interpretation reasonabilities arbitrary cause of racism on that we reject architecture and predicate on the theories since we are able to adequately prepare for it. Second off, we advocate for the entirety of except for their mandate of black noise. We consider the exact legacy bundle of the act of for necessity of black noise inevitably pushes black noise and having to be in the public sphere that work with the black interior that is not dictated by public discourse and Quashie. Well, limits our capacity to see the full humanity concept of black and privileges public explicitly resistance black cultures are identifying the idea of expressing towards a gainer social audience that black resistance supposed to be loud and really is meant as metaphorically inform how we think about black subjectivity which is contrarian seeing the equity and analyze that by a constant discussion black lives on this signifying the knowledge for the capacity to support resistance let's say less about black subjectivity that is refusal not a characteristic of integrity already overdetermined purpose the sovereignty of the quality of the interior is not a place to render an explanation the interior is under command and protection of the country the outside which is not based on something shaped by racialization one there is the possibility of agency that discloses that additional insight the black subject has been linked to the other real consciousness and imagination of the world around him and this includes the resisting public discourse and the black subject seems to be an interior over religious erase part of subjectivity evisceration of the interior dehumanizes black bodies Quashie also we're trying to spend the jump clothes as a public face of a memorialize the public considered looking and you can see something more that has fascinations in the same moment in deep spirituality as their interiors rarely discuss how it is that the intimacy can be deferred commented only for publicity blackness is often defined as a project of radical loud resistance to the dominant exposition of what we have black cultures and politics and representation where black culture community except for social political meaningfulness rather than a marker of individuality also supposed to tell us something about race or racism that determination to see black culture through social public with race is intended to dehumanize black people and endorsement of black white is not literal sentiment embracement of non-public form resistance the capacity interior to be resistant Quashie public would discourse and really not to the public things they need and required to be understood the quality of sensibility being someone's the capacity of the interior being inward and like contributed along the public things of imagination not connected to the worship in regard to the life civil and not overdetermined quite is present based on refusal purpose that problem is not inclusive but expressed is so that what is public but is also beyond resisting can we say about black subjectivity the case sure the applicants 1 or 3 but that's a double term with the applicants that proves that if given the chance not to engage in discussion that they pause it as being the most important that they won't yes to in our theory paradigm issues anything else is unfair because it moves 13 minutes of next pieces and we don't get new responses to 1 hour arguments because it just gives the effort free ball the role of the ballot is to vote for the better debate of theirs is arbitrary making self-serving hold us to a standard of episode progression where they don't where they point out one bad assumption and don't let them with a subtotal of their impact they only get to the unique amount solved by the affirmative filter the debate to the scope of something they do impact to the root cause if they don't solve a second no conformative methodological opposite of the plan rejected because it explodes predictable limits backing up next not making any discussion qualitative works such as double so the app uses the state that's a plan technically make arguments as to why the state is bad proof that they facilitate and bolster the very structure that they aim to be for because the individual debates don't shape individual subjectivity because they'll to shape community belief and progress competitive nature that requires straying away from personal beliefs only technical debate and evidence comparison preserve fair judge evaluation comes survival politics feels to discover the divine limits and criticized by starting from the survival point of counter hegemony and inadvertently reifies the subject and causes domination driven 12 comes to give the mind shape with the equivalent to negative attached to the positive information to be conserved this negative space as a linear statement fully opposite truth within these inertia company with that particular languages are no self-founding comes to choose to originally define the boundaries of thinking by government reproduces structure that collection aims to direct the policies of information blackness imagination resulting to become consumed by debate and normalized forms of blackness saying local ever regime working parties with routine determination imagination arts of sharing possibilities yellows and forms of domestic and political forces to producing as that equation reproducing social normative potentiality occurred in terms of with that side examination now normalization realizes discourse and normal social patriarchal dynamics the system of regular condition individual women are responsible for overcoming the audience identification with the resulting here which adjusts the number why audience identification and subject finality we recently added that our history the only way to find a more substantive object here appears fireworks transform after feeling social and accepted to our right so I transist the national view of overcoming the results taken to solution to end of the outcome of art there charging mutual aid because of what the state wants shifting the labor responsibility of structural reform to the state community so that's by austerity politics winner and Illinois 21 a proliferation with mutual aid risk allowing the state to become positive to austerity over social reproduction zero sum given one after sexual forming with the other half be shortened by another entity. These states' interest in resilience will describe communities as a capacity to social talking about the absence of welfare, disaster relief, and impact by state forces to unprotected labor responsive communities, disaster abandoning the states have been habitable communities for regardless of all state responsibilities. Relief organizations legitimized austerity group communities can survive without support. Community-oriented solutions are alone insufficient enough to solve wide opportunities to solve. You need to organize and make for urban policies forward. Also, an attempt to self-reliance, personal responsibility, rejects mass action. 7. Demands related to legislation from the cities that one of these demands be a compromise on self-housing requires national mobilization. 2. The local sector for mass political action, allow community-based resources can revamp urban structure to benefit the city, mass services, the nation, building ties, community funding, neighborhood that is self life and pretend to be the solution. Project the idea that grassroots movement can only be effective outside the state. There's a long history of black women use like legal change for conversion to columns. They hold columns nine institution to reduce background to ordination solutions around healthcare, housing, literacy, and policies designed to exclude empowerment cannot agree with that reforming institution that policies exclude segregation cannot be changed overnight. Trying to change the policies of the constitution important strategy within the domain rather than use the legal system to challenge the legitimate segregation. African women have American have various strategies, civil rights, have voting rights. The creation of American women protection have resulted in tangible benefits by new challenges or fewer strategies with leading continue to produce pictures of African American women occupying position of authority inside the government agencies. Everything is required to change the U.S. laws. That's a cross question. I didn't read the Regina Austin 8 card.
Okay. So I guess kind of like, why is black noise bad?
We're not saying that black noise is bad by any means. What we're saying is that the act mandates the use of black noise as resistance. We're saying that that mandate is bad.
How does the act mandate black
I
noise?
inserted the line that says that we should use our voices to
How's that
protect
a
black
mandate?
noise.
How is should a mandate?
Okay, should is very different than could. Should connotates that you have an obligation to do something, but could says you have the option to do
What is
something.
black quiet?
Sure, black quiet means that you are sort of looking into the interior. We give a few examples. The first example is the example of the athletes from San Jose State University that are memorialized at San Jose State University that kind of put their fists up in like solidarity with being against anti-blackness at the Olympics. That's one example of black quiet. But the second example that the card gives is sort of the spirituality that you can sort of engage with black quiet, i.e. looking towards the interior, how black people sort of came up with their own forms of spirituality to sort of resist slave masters in historical times. That was all interior and looking within to sort of resist the state and its anti-black and its anti-black projections onto the black body.
Okay. And then also, I guess like, why should we be rejecting performative offense?
Because it explodes predictable limits. That's kind of
In what way does the act have performative?
we say that any performative offense that you might come up with and shift into in the one era is bad.
What does that mean?
And serve as a preempt.
What does that mean? What is performative offense?
Performative offense is something that's garnered off, like that is not garnered off of the implementation of the plan.
I mean, what I'm asking for is like specific things. Like, what can I get up and do in the 1AR that would be performative offense and should be rejected?
I don't know. You could do something like you could read like a poem in the 1AR. I'm not
Why are
necessarily
poems
sure.
bad?
That's not like offense from the plan. I'm just like spitballing here. Like you could do something. It's a preempt to what you could do.
Okay, that's fine. And I guess like also on the double turn, in what way does the act use the state?
That's the plan text, and that's the stuff that we write on the T framework shell. Like if you don't use the state, then you violate T framework. If you do use the state, it's double turn. So I mean, it's like kind of double.
That's fine. Also on the TDAs, can you explain the first TDA?
Sure. Basically, a negative right means that you are free from something. The first two cards in your app are impact cards that say that housing creates criminalization. We say that you should affirm housing as a negative right that is free from criminalization. That solves all of your
How is
offense.
that
But
the app?
what?
How is that all of the app though?
Those are the impacts of your app. The TDA solves the impacts of your app, but it is still topical because it engages in the state and guarantees a legal right to housing. But it is free from something. It is not the creation of mutual aid societies that end up with a lack of criminalization. It just starts as a legal right to housing.
Okay, and then also on the Griffin 12 card, what's the word?
Do you want me to explain that? Okay. Basically, the Griffin 12 card says that defining yourself in a negative light leaves space for there to be positive redefinement by the state.
Okay. I'm gonna run. Are we doing 4 or 5? Okay. Man, I keep going through like waves of having energy and not having energy, and the cold's just not.
The cold was really fucking annoying this morning. I was shivering. Like,
Bro, I just couldn't make arguments. Yeah, I think like terrible 2NRs. I got told I lacked originality, and it sounded like a 2NR that Zion or Nate would give. That hurt my feelings.
I mean, that's a compliment. They gave great to
Low key, but also it just hurt my feelings when they said I lacked originality. I was like, dang.
Yeah, that's a pretty good thing to say.
Yeah, just take everything with a grain of salt.
Alright, the order is going to be the oh wait, actually, let me okay, that's awesome. The order's going to be the app, T, and then
Is there any place that you're starting on the app, or is it just the order?
well, it's kind of like an extension, and then it goes into
I'm good. Are there cards?
Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
You vote after the face of ever-changing policies that have allowed for any Obama-era anti-segregation rules being rolled back in the rampant segregation in housing today. Homelessness has had a long and dark history, one that needs to be explored, one that your typical policy apple only ever skimmed the surface of. The criminalization of homelessness gave birth to the social order that suffocates black life, and the thought that uses a black feminist radical imagination to reconfigure space and creating communities of care that function as radical housing. The Methodists and the app guarantees our rights housing, but communities of care rupture the current notions such as private property, i.e. everyone would have guaranteed right to housing, and allows for radical forms of housing such as grassroots movements like the Moms for Housing, and extended the role of the judges the role of judges to be a democratic educator. The current system of education uphold violent ideologies and politics. As an educator, the role is to help break down these systems to provide methods for justice to be possible. You should be preferring our role of the judge instead of like defaulting to voting for the better debater, because it would just allow for instances within debate that are just inherently violent, i.e. this means that you actually position yourself to make the debate space and actually like a better place in the ways that we go about education on the I guess kind of like flow proper. First off, on the double turn argument, there's like no actual double turn here. Just because we use the like text of the resolution doesn't mean that we're like defending the state and the state action in itself. I.e., if you look back to all of the 1AC and how we say that like state-based housing in itself is bad, and then like the courts are bad, it's pretty obvious that we're not using like the state, meaning that there's no actual kind of like double turn here. Also, on the like Griffin 12's evidence, there's like the like ways in which we like use the ways in which we use the Gum's evidence isn't actually like survival politics in itself. It's just like ways in which we can kind of like are like structure and like advocate for things. I.e., it's not necessarily like quote unquote survival, but it's ways in which like I guess kind of things can function, the ways in which we should just like position things within the world, and then yeah. Also, in response to James 14, the like affirmation of imagination argument, it's not actually like consumed by debate. It doesn't normalize violence. I.e., it means that I can get up and like talk about my like experiences, and also we can look at like the past or historical like examples of like black feminist imagination, the way that like they repurpose states which are like spaces which in itself would there's not the normalization of violence. I.e., they actively like speak out against this. Also like in response to like mutual aid fails group these arguments. This is just wrong. It is like apparently there are plenty of examples of such kind of like that notion being bad, and then it's also that like black quiet in itself wouldn't, I guess, kind of have
Okay,
like the
that's
same
fine.
levels of solvency.
That's fine. Okay, it should be at the very top of the document. Let me know if y'all see it. I'm down. We advocate for the entirety of the act except for their mandate of black noise. The 1AC says the word should, not could, and in order to be effective, they have to engage in the public expressiveness of black noise, but that creates the foreclosure of the interiority of black, white, and black oneness. Quashie gives an example of the athletes that raise their fists in resistance, but there are other methods that dive into spiritual and silent components of the black body that never get talked about in the world of the affirmative. The nature of black noise forces blackness to always engage in the social aspects of racialization, but never gives them a moment to focus on the individuality of the subject position. The impact of work setting is the dehumanization of black bodies, which is 1AC Quashie. The value of black people is tied to their ability to engage in public resistance, but in order for the social view anti-black violence to occur, that means that black people are shaped by their engagement to resistance and violence, which limits blackness because it says that they're only rendered valuable if they exist along a certain line, which the 1AC forces them into. We allow for black people to exist outside the realms of socialization instead of being always tied to institutions that are oppressive versus when they're able to break free from those social categories by engaging in the quiet. The only argument that the AF made against the counterplan was that it was problematic and that reading this was bad. The other argument was out of time. It should not be the other argument about black quiet not solving should not be on your flow. It was not in the time of the 1AR, but we'll answer these arguments here. First, that the counterplan is not problematic. All we're saying is that the way that the AF was read in a problematic way. The AF was read in a problematic way. If you buy that the role of the ballot is to be a democratic educator, that means we have to look towards the best forms of rhetoric that we are using around, and it is not the rhetoric of the AF. The line that I reinserted in the counterplan says the word should, not could. That is inherently bad because should implies obligation. That's American Heritage Dictionary. Not used to express obligation or duty. Should expresses duty, obligation, or necessity. That's obsessive one used an auxiliary function to express duty, obligation, or necessity. These cards sort of prove that the AF institutes an obligation among black people to sort of engage in black noise and does not give them the option to not engage in black noise. The counterplan itself does not say that black noise is bad. There's literally not one card where we're saying that black noise is bad, but rather we're saying that the foreclosure of black silence in and of itself is bad. If they are not reading a reason why the act sort of allows black people to engage in black silence, but we are reading a reason as to why the pick allows black people to engage in either noise or silence, that means that you are going to be voting on the pick because only we allow the option for black people to choose their form of resistance. That was the link that we read. But next, we'll prove that black silence is in fact resistance. Is in fact resistance to the state. The examples that we've given about the athletes, one, those were extremely resistant to the Olympics and started a conversation about what it means to be anti-black within a sphere of sports. But next is the spirituality arguments that I said in cross-ex, when black people sort of look towards themselves and look towards the spirit in themselves and came up with their own forms of religion against what the state was sort of imposing on them with forms of Christianity. That gave them a leg up because it took the power away that the state was inserting onto black bodies, which gave them the power to rise up in the future, which means the pick turns the case because the only way that they will be able to sort of resist the state in the future is if black people also have the ability to resist in quiet. But the next reason that it turns the case is that if black people do not want to engage in forms of noise, they will not be able to be better advocates to sort of generate a movement that is able to knock down the systems of the state, knock down the anti-black systems of the state in the future, which means that only generating options for what black people are allowed to engage in is good. There's genuinely no argument that they can go for in the 2AR. Also, the counterplan does not, the pick does not use the state at all. All we say is that black quiet is good to resist the state. These movements don't get ignored. They've historically worked. The T framework page. I'll concede that I made this gets rid of any impact turns because it proves that they don't violate, which means that none of their impact turns matter. Also, we're not going for T, which means that they don't get to weigh the impact turns on the other flow. Any new 2AR cross applications are new, and I don't get a 3R to respond to them because they're highly unpredictable and allow the 2AR to be shifty. So don't allow for new 2AR cross applications, especially if they weren't flagged in the 1AR, the case. We're going to extend the role of the ballot here. The role of the ballot is to vote for the better debater. Anything else is arbitrary and self-serving and holds us to a standard of epistemic perfection where they point out one bad assumption and when look to 1AC crosses. When I asked them what it was to be a democratic educator, all they said was to engage in less oppressive forms of education. If you cannot tell me what a less oppressive form of education is in the RV, then you should not be voting on their role of the ballot. There's a double bind on the role of the ballot here. First is that if you buy the role of the ballot is that the role of the judge is to be a democratic educator. That means you are voting on the pig because the pig means that their form of rhetoric was bad and it was actually oppressive towards black people, which turns their offense. But if you do not buy their role of the ballot, that means that you are voting neg on presumption, because the act does not do anything to solve the issues that they say that they are solving in the first place. The argument that we're extending on the role of the ballot is the 4 point, which was inherently dropped. This proved the 4 point about individual debates not shaping individual subjectivities proves our argument, because it says that being a democratic educator does literally not do anything to break down the structures of the state and the ideologies that they say are oppressive, because the content of debate does not translate outside of their own, i.e. when people are debating this, that they are not going to become inherently more democratic educators in the future. All they're going to remember is that they lost to this app and they're going to prep it out better. It does not actually change the subjectivities of anyone in the round. This influence also influences their role of the ballot also influences intervention, because there's no delineation as to what a democratic educator is, which means that the judge is just going to insert their opinions into it, which is shifty and makes debates completely untenable. But the terms that we're going for on cases, first, the mutual aid term. First is the Black Panther Party is failing right now. There's so little Black Panther Party communities left that are able to provide proper care because they're being run down by lack of funding, etc. But they didn't answer the card proper, which is basically saying that mutual aid is what the state wants people to do because it causes unpaid labor and turns the act methodology, because it doesn't actually give credit to people who are actually engaging in forms of mutual aid. But the second is that they drop forward, which says that mass political action is needed within grassroots movements. Otherwise, there's literally no way that they can scale up, because the state is able to guarantee legal rights to people, which allow them to pursue grassroots movements in the future.
I'm running this one.
irrelevant properly explain how the like should can they properly explain should in the way in which it means that there's an obligation for foreign also when voting think like does their evidence and analysis provide enough of a warrant for black noise being bad or harmful? Though when I see extension or evidence or literal examples of black noise being good, it doesn't inherently mean that I have to be noisy. These assumptions that the PIC is built upon in itself are problematic, i.e. the first thing that comes to your mind when black and noise are in the same sentence is that it requires black people to be loud. We just say we should position ourselves against the state and advocate for what we believe in, i.e. it doesn't mean that like I'm getting up, kicking and screaming, and in itself the PIC still advocates for like all black positions, meaning that if you buy their if you buy their arguments, you like should have gone on, i.e. they like said in CX that people having silent protest and describing it as black, buying the affirmative inherently necessitates internal reflection and the ways in which we structure ourselves in the mutual way that benefit to function, meaning there is no net benefit to the PIC.
Good debate. Not gonna lie, this was the most fire, like, one in C against my athletic head. I appreciate you.
try to be like a little bit brief because I don't know how much I can say, but I also have a lot written down that I would like to say. First, I guess I'll just start with the app. I like it, and I like the way that it engages with the topic. I do think, though, that reading hooks with this app as like a method card about housing and such is not necessarily a great idea, because if I recall correctly, Bell Hooks was like literally a landlord, which I think could be an interesting insight and perhaps a justification as to why the profit motive and like structures of capital overcode this sort of like commitment to racial justice and racial like the fight against racialization. Just because I think that like is probably true in the context of an app that is reading hooks on like a housing topic. Likewise, I think the 1NC is interesting. I think the counterplan makes sense and is contextual to the app method, which I like quite a lot. I also like the TNterp because I feel like it's very specific and not just like reading generic like policy making like good cards, which I think was definitely the move. Just because I think that like it's very easy to pivot out of that. And the 1AR, I think that the like definition of rights is very important and is good to be reading. For the 1AR, I think there's definitely a warrant as to why this counterclaim is problematic, but I don't think the way the argument was read in the 1AR has that warrant. I think it's probably something like, you know, telling black people how to resist and to like literally telling black people to like be quiet in like the face of violence is probably bad, like especially as like a non-black individual in the context of this debate round. Obviously the answer to that is just that like the cards justify why that's not problematic actually, but I think it might be compelling and might be something to think about. I also thought that there were time allocation issues, which was sad because the responses that you're going for are very substantive and they're very, very good. They're just over allocated in certain places and under allocated in other places. And then I have 2 notes for the 2NR that I think that I can say. First, I think it should be restructured to go for the winner and forward evidence first as a way to generate external offense for the counterplan and a sort of external net benefit, and then explain why the counterplan is capable of resolving that net benefit. I think this makes a lot more sense logically, since you're able to like leverage these cards as offense for the counterplan that it's capable of resolving, instead of just going for them as like a solvency deficit to the app. You do this with the internal net benefit, but I think you should also be generating these as an external net benefit as well, which is an interaction that isn't made clear, but I think that it can be explained. Secondly, I think that you should have some sort of an argument about evaluating the plan text in a vacuum, since I think the majority of the competition of the counterplan hinges on defining words in the affirmative advocacy, which I think could become problematic for you given a different 1AR and 2AR. I think there's a 2AR pivot that just goes for like perm new the counterplan. It's not like contextual. Their definitions are like wrong. The text of the advocacy doesn't super matter, and then just goes for like reasons why like it's clear what the app method means and why this is literally just like the method of the app. Ideally, this should happen in the 1NC, but there's definitely should be some gesture towards it by the 2NR. But yeah, I think that's about all I can say.
Yeah, I would largely to know what Dylan said. I think that as far as the app goes, I would agree with Dylan. I think the 1AR has some time allocation issues, and I think that a lot of what probably needs to happen on the pick is like certainly implicit in a lot of the arguments that you're making in the extension of the app, right? They're just, I think that like just explaining like the implication of some of these arguments in the app is like reasons why black silence can't solve some of these problems, right? For instance, like there is not really, or at least I could think of a fairly compelling argument to say like there's not really a way for black women to have this like interior struggle that results in like them having a house to sleep in tonight, right? Like at some point we got to do something external here that this involves some sort of action out in the world that we have to be willing to take, right? And I think that in that way, sort of couching yourself as like the more material action here, I think sort of helps and would be more compelling. I think as far as the NR goes, I largely agree with what Dylan says as far as like leveraging sort of the opposite of the case stuff that you go for just as offense for the counterplan. I also just think that the most of the NR time on case is kind of strange to me because I don't think that there's like a super compelling reason for you to like be going for your role in the ballot still. I think you're probably just like everything that you're going for probably works as offense under the AF's framework, or at least I think you can probably make that articulation, right? So I think that it is probably not super well spent time, and like I said, while I certainly think that like some of the 2AR stuff about, for instance, we're not like labor in the sense that like we're straight up like functionally stealing property, right? So like we were actually, if anything, sort of taking away labor, right? While I think that these arguments might be somewhat new to the 2ER, right, I think that giving the AF sort of a chance to kind of come back and just go, look, even if we like kind of got, you know, some sort of way that we frame the AF wrong, like we do something and that means that the AF is at least a kind of good idea, right? Like sort of part of the spin that the 2ER starts to go for in case, I think giving them the shot to go for that, like a risk you don't need to take, right? So I think that the NR should just like largely stand up and go, look, they're right, you should be a democratic educator. Here's why they have sort of rhetorically gotten the question of like black resistance to anti-blackness wrong, and then like the Whitner stuff that just sort of says like, and also the state will like co-opt your movement and use it as a way to like be even worse, right? Like I think that stuff makes a lot more sense and just doesn't create a risk that you don't need to create there.
I have a question about that. I feel like I'm not able to understand how that operates under the democratic educators rule.
Well, I mean, I think that the argument would just be that if they are correct that resisting anti-blackness in housing policies are a way to sort of be a democratic educator, then your argument that actually you would just allow the government to be racist. I think your argument there is just, to whatever extent they are correct that this is offensive to their framework, what I am going for is just a deterrent to this.
Okay, that makes sense.
I have a couple of questions. On the pig, so I was like thinking about some of it, and like I had some of it on the paper, I just like didn't have time, so my time allocation was kind of bad. But like on the like spiritual movements argument, do you think that like something that was like mutual aid in itself, like the communities, like we come together and like collectively would have moments of silence, i.e. like in protection, like within the home would require some kind of like, I guess kind of self-reflection?
Maybe. I mean, I think that you can also maybe articulate this less as our argument here is that like this should be violent resistance to like the state, but rather that sort of black women just like coming together to help other black women is very different than what they're articulating this as, right? This is not like you have to like get out and fight the cops or something. This is just like black women should come together in a room and say, hey, what do you need? What can I do for you? Right? And that, I think, in a way, I think you can articulate that's like, at least, if not like spiritual, at least like an interior sort of way of thinking about themselves, right? Something that sort of talks about their subjectivity rather than.
Yeah. Like one thing that I will say is that I think there could be a compelling like turn to the counterplan argument, because I don't think that the AF is very explicitly saying like everything needs to be like this like violent outward external like revolutionary effort, right? The AF is very clear in saying that like things like mutual aid, right, are parts of like the resistance effort, but also I don't think that that precludes like other forms of resistance. But I think in order for that to happen, there needs to be some sort of pushback on this sort of like linguistic argument that the AF uses the word should, which like precludes this sort of like effort. But I do think that there could be a very compelling argument.
Well, I was also
there.
like trying to think about it, because even if it is like should means that there's like the obligation, couldn't there like, doesn't that mean that, or I guess kind of in some ways, does it really like foreclose opportunities like to be quiet, i.e. be loud when it's necessary, then be quiet when it's necessary?
I mean, I think you can develop that argument more. I just don't think that the 1ER deals with that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm just like thinking in the future.
Yeah, I got you. And like I said, I think that is something you probably have to do on the counterplan and sort of give yourself time to get to. But like I said, I think that some of the other arguments that you sort of start with on the counterplan can maybe sort of just be like explained as like quick implications to like extensions of the AF, right? So that when you get to the counterplan, instead of trying to explain like a quick solvency deficit, you're just getting to explain like why the counterplan doesn't compete.
Yeah. I think that's a much better place to like hedge your bets on, is just like this counterplan probably doesn't compete with the AF, because I think that that's probably true. Like I think that this counterplan probably just is the AF.
I have a question. So when the 2ER, when I was explaining the counterplan, did it come across as me saying that black people have to be quiet, or did I kind of make it clear that there was an option for them to engage in noise or be quiet?
I think that was clear.
I think that's
To be clear, I don't think that this argument that's like the silencing like this counterplan is problematic argument is particularly great, but I do think that it is maybe something to think about.
Yeah.
I think the 2NR explanation though kind of like assuades a lot of that like the question of whether or not this is silencing, because I don't think that it is.
I also-
Especially given the explanation. Sorry.
I also think that like you should probably head on at least trying to explain some reason why you think that the AFS method like more broadly involves or would involve sort of necessary like noise making, whatever that necessarily means, right? Like I don't think you should just hedge all of this on they said should somewhere in like the bottom half of the AF, so like they compete, right? I think that even if all that is like a sort of articulation of the AF that says, look, they very clearly think that to some degree this is a question of Black people resisting the state in a way that is fairly active and like not interior. Like I think there should be an explanation of that too. What
Yeah.